Hi everyone, this is Brian McInerney, the hydrologist with the National Weather Service. This is the Natural Hazards Briefing for April 2014. And this briefing is part of the Natural Hazards Workshop where my presentation wouldn't work on the FEMA webinar. So I thought we'd try this route with my voice and we'll just do the presentation so you can see the graphics. And we'll get to it. So the dominant weather during January really influenced December and January, and the main culprit was this pattern right here. And if you look, this is what I was speaking of. This high pressure that extends all the way up to northern Alaska and then down almost to the equator is a blocking high. So you can see as the weather would move into the U.S. from the west or the Pacific Northwest, it would be shunted north and then drop down into the southern part of the U.S. and then up the East Coast. So this part of the country had all sorts of cold, snowy weather, whereas the West was shut out for the most part. California at this point had snowpacks 5% of average. And this blocking high remained in the area to some extent, really for the past 3 years. It's our dominant weather feature and why we're behind in our snowpack as of now. And when you look at the total precip during January, this is what you see. The cooler colors indicate above normal precip, and you can see the green and kind of that purple area in Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana is a direct result of the jet coming down from Alaska as it's made its way over that high. But if you look in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, parts of Nevada, and California, including southern Utah, they had precipitation less than 10% in most of these areas for January. But then right around the end of January, early February, the pattern shifted. And this is what happened. When you look, here's the Hawaiian Islands over this way. The westerly flow is this atmospheric river that just moves direct west right through California and Utah. And these areas received over 2 feet of water in the area to the east of Logan City. Northern Utah did incredibly well, and also parts of southern U.S. and then the East Coast again got nailed, and all of this area still. But the high pressure is still there. It's just got broken through. It's up in this location here. It's in this location here. But this jet stream made it through with copious amounts of water and energy. And it was what turned around a snowpack in northern Utah from 50% of normal to 100%. It was great. It was just what we needed. When you look at the total precip anomaly for February as a result of that pattern shift, northern Utah did quite well, Pacific Northwest did quite well. New Mexico, California, Arizona still not doing well. They did not get much with this, and neither did southern Utah, and that's why we're seeing what we are. When you look at the total precip for March, more of the same pattern. Pacific Northwest doing well, areas of the desert Southwest not doing well at all. And then when you look at April, basically all the west, all the way across to the Midwest is not doing very well at all. California has parts that did well, and they need that desperately. But when you look at Utah, from April 1st through April 20th, not doing very well at all. Most of the energy was down near the panhandle of Florida and Georgia and Louisiana and those areas. When you look at temperature with this, something to consider. With February, when that system moved in right about the 8th, it brought very warm temperatures. So the moisture that did fall during this time from the 8th all the way to the 29th had temperatures at averaging around 5 to 10, even 15, some days up to almost 20 degrees above normal. The snow was above 8,000 feet, and below that was rain during this entire time. We had a lot of rain in the lower basins. When you look at March, more of the same. When you take a look at this cumulatively, 38 consecutive above normal days. Long period of time where it was very warm. So the lower mountains really haven't seen much snow. And when we did this presentation yesterday, we have south-facing aspects that are mostly bare, and north-facing aspects up to the snow line is probably about 7,500 feet as we speak. And then when you look at April, similar, only 5 days, maybe 6 days below normal, but it's been very warm all the way through February, March, and April. So let's get to the runoff forecast. And when you look at where we are with the volume of water anticipated to flow out of the mountains from April 1st through the end of July, we see the Bear, the latest forecast for the green in March, indicates that the Bear is anticipated to receive 90% of average coming out of the mountains from the spring months, from spring snowmelt runoff. Weber at 75, Six Creeks at 60, and that number is lower because it has some low elevation watersheds. Red Butte Creek and Emigration are low elevation watersheds. They receive their precip in the form of rain, not snow, so we don't have a lot of snow to run off in the low elevation areas. Utah Lake at 65. When you move over to the green, the upper green benefited from that descending jet stream in January, February, March, all the way through. They're at 130%. Yap and White in Colorado at 125, the Duchesne at 75, and the lower green at 80. Upper Colorado, main stem feeds Lake Powell. They're at 135% as of the latest forecast, with the Gunnison at 115 and the Dolores at 90. Colorado did much better as a result of that jet stream that dropped down. It was Colorado was far enough west that it made it into that descending jet stream, where Utah was too far west and we didn't see it. We were under the high. But when you look at severe, now we're in south central Utah, 45%. And then you look at the Virgin at 20%. They've got some areas in the Virgin are maybe 15% anticipated from this runoff. Very poor. Peak flow forecast, though, and this is one of those charts that you look at and there's just so many numbers. But what I wanted to illustrate is right here. The Logan, typically it has flood flow at 1,372 CFS, cubic feet per second. Think of one basketball moving by you per second is 1 CFS. When we reach 1,372 CFS, we see damage in the town of Logan. When you look at our most probable forecasts, and these forecasts were made by the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center, the mean daily, meaning the average flow over a 24-hour period, calls for 950 CFS. However, the instantaneous forecast for 50% is 1,000 CFS. And on the outset, we have a 10% chance or greater that we could hit 1,200 CFS. Now, this is all dependent on the spring weather. Cold and wet will make these numbers go up. Warm and dry will drop these numbers off. We can only forecast weather about 5, maybe 7 days. Beyond that, we don't know. So we're going to have to wait and see where this shakes out. But that's something to consider. When you look at El Nino, how they do El Ninos, they look at a certain part of the globe. And if it's warmer than normal, you can put your finger on that area and then point to southern Utah and say, when you have warmer than normal conditions, it typically gets cooler and wetter. But when you look at the area that they look at, and it's about a little southeast from Hawaii, right on the equator, in this range here, 170 degrees west, 5 degrees north, 5 degrees south, and 120 degrees west, they call this area the Nino 3.4 region. And this is where they look at to see if it's going to be an El Nino, warmer than normal, or La Nina, which is cooler than normal. And what we're seeing is that currently this is what it looks like in the equatorial Pacific. You can see Baja, South America on your right, on your left, that is Australia, and this is what it looks like typically. But when you look at the anomaly, is it colder or warmer? This shows you that it's kind of a mixed bag. You don't really see much. But when you look underneath, we're looking down about 200 meters below the surface. You see this very large, warm pool of water that's moving up, and this is why they think we're going to have an El Nino as this warmer pool extends up to the surface, and this is what the forecasts look like. And so when you look at the temperature on the y-axis and time on the x-axis, right about September, October, November, we should be up around 1 point some degrees above normal. This is the forecast. That yellow line with all these spaghetti plots are all different model runs, but they look at right in the middle, the most probable outcome when you look up all these different plumes. And it indicates that they expect a stronger El Nino by October, November, December in that range. And we could have a moderate. If it gets to strong, that's when we can forecast with somewhat good skill that it's going to be cooler and wetter in southern Utah and the desert southwest, whereas the Pacific Northwest will become warmer and drier. But something to consider here. You know, we talked about Logan possibly reaching 10% near the flood stage. Well, we've been here before, and when you look at Little Cottonwood Creek in 2010, it flooded to the tune of millions of dollars. And I think this group knew that we underforecasted this greatly. But when you look at the snow for 2010, it was very low in Snowbird and at Mildy North, which is in Little Cottonwood Canyon, and Brighton, which is in Big Cottonwood Canyon. The green line indicates 2010, which would tell you you don't have much snow volume to flood. 2006, on the other hand, is that red line. That's the one you think, boy, it's got so much snow, it's going to flood. And that was not the case. Here's the aerial extent of the snowpack on June 1st, 2010, as opposed to June 6, 2006. Or I'm sorry, June 1st, 2006. And you can see June of 2010 had much more snow in June aerially over Little Cottonwood and Big Cottonwood Canyon. Those are the two areas we're looking at. 2006 might have had a lot of snow on north-facing treed slopes, but aerially, where we can't measure very well, we don't have snow tell stations, there was much more snow all over the place in 2010. When you look at May precipitation departure from normal, the northern Wasatch had 110 to 150% of average snow, and precip could have been in the form of rain also, but a lot of that was snow. So it's very wet. And then when you look at the temperatures during May, it was the coldest May, one of the coldest Mays on record, third coldest since 1953, 5.6 degrees lower than average. So very wet during May, very cold, kept that snowpack. And then what happened on June 5th? Temperatures got up 7 degrees above normal after 5 days of above average temperature, and that brought down the melt. And we had all sorts of flooding out of Little Cottonwood Canyon. And the main reason, when you look at this graphic, you think, God, there's so many lines on this. But if you look at colors, match the colors. So when you look at 2005, which is a very big snow year, and you look at the lower elevations, it took 30 days from the low elevation to melt up to the higher elevations, and then the snow was out. When you look at 2006, which was also a very big year, it took 20 days for the low elevation to melt out to the upper elevation, so it was orderly. When you look at 2010, it only took 5 days for the bottom to melt all the way up to the top. So it melted all together. It was more synchronized. The whole hill came off all at once for the most part. And the flood only lasted 3 days, but it was damaging up to the tune of millions of dollars. When you look at, in 2006, the melt rates, it was 1.5 inches per day on the upper areas, 1.8 inches per day in the lower basin. But when you look at 2010, we were melting at a rate of 2.5 to 3 inches per day, and even at the lower end was 2 inches per day. So the melt rates on all aspects, all elevations, were melting all at once at over 2.5 inches per day, up to 2 inches in the lower, and it came off. It was synchronized, and it caused problems. The reason I bring this up is because we have to wait and see what the spring weather is going to be. Cold and wet could bring these flood numbers up a little higher, but right now it doesn't look like we're going to flood much of anything, but we need to be vigilant. And I, for one, wasn't doing very well in 2010 with this forecast, by the way. So when you look at the peaks, 2010 had a peak of 900 CFS coming out of Little Cottonwood. It floods at 800, damage occurs, bankfuls at 700. 2006 only made it to 650 CFS, where 2005 made it to about 670 CFS. So not much really in those years, even though the snowpack was quite big. 2010 flooded because it was cold, it was wet. We added to the snowpack, we added aerially, we added north and south elevations. It was packed. So there you go. I would ask questions, but since I can't hear your questions, give me a call at this number, 801-971-2033, or email me. Anything you need, let me know. That's why I'm here. My apologies for our snafu with the briefing, but hopefully this will be more of the same. I do appreciate you taking the time to listen to this, and feel free to share this with anybody who may benefit. Thank you.